In the process of telling tonight's last story, I get a little bit too passionate and end up doxing myself. Welcome back. Thank y'all for joining us. No worries if you missed last week's part 1 for this tier of the iceberg. If you'd like, you can watch through this one and then go back so that you don't miss anything. As always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you love George Michaels, and if you don't, then you can kindly fuck. As stated previously, we're dealing with some truly heavy topics in this series, so try to get comfortable and we'll get right into it. With Halloween right around the corner, I felt this would be the best story to start tonight's video off with. So we'll be taking a trip to Deer Park, Texas in October of 1974. Now allow me to start this one by saying Ronald Clark O'Brien, for all intents and purposes, can catch these hands. Like, he was a coward who worked as an optician by day. He was a deacon at his local church. He helped some bus program get off the ground in their community for local transportation, which is cool and all. But we're about to find out that Ron was a little bit of a POS. At least I'm pretty confident in saying so, and after we get through with this one, I'm pretty sure you will be as well. On Halloween of 1974, O'Brien took his kids out trick-or-treating with another, I believe, a dad and the kids from another family. The first house they approached was unoccupied, so the children moved on with the other dad, while O'Brien stayed behind for a moment. A minute later, he rejoined the group with 5 21-inch pixie sticks, like the really big ones with the thick plastic. Ronald's story was that the house's occupants had been home and they caught him walking away and gave him these expensive treats. He held on to them until the end of the night. And then once the kids were finished trick-or-treating, he gave one each to the family friends' children, gave one each to his son and daughter, and before they went inside, he actually stopped a neighborhood kid that he recognized from his local church and gave him the 5th one. That's just that little fact. This is so messed up. This one's so messed up. Once inside, he told his 2 children that they could each have 1 piece of candy before bed. His son Timothy unfortunately chose the pixie stick. He had trouble getting the powder out, so Ronald helped him, at which point his son said that the candy tasted bitter. So Ronald got him a glass of Kool-Aid to wash it down. Jesus. Shortly after, Timothy started saying he had stomach pain, and then he went to the bathroom. His dad followed him, at which point Timothy collapsed and began convulsing in his father's arms. Timothy O'Brien would die shortly after on the way to the hospital. A full hour hadn't even passed since he'd eaten the candy. During the autopsy, medical examiners noticed that he had a scent of almond coming from his mouth, which for those of you that don't know is a telltale sign of cyanide poisoning. And after further testing, it was clear that he'd passed away due to ingesting large amounts of potassium cyanide. Thankfully, police were able to recover the other 4 pixie sticks before they'd been eaten and found that the top 2 inches of candy had been replaced with granules of cyanide. News of what happened spread through the community like wildfire. Like, it was crazy. Parents all over started throwing away their kids' candy. Some of them were checking them. Nobody wanted to let their kids have candy that year. But we'll get into that in a minute. Turns out Ronald wasn't the model citizen everybody thought he was. Not only was he drowning himself in debt due to gambling and other vices, the guy was in the process of losing his current job. Investigators discovered that in the months leading up to October of that year, he'd taken life insurance policies out on his children, and in his twisted, vile mind, thought that sacrificing his children for a payout was the solution to get out of his debt. His actions and Timothy's unfortunate end has and will go on to inspire generational paranoia in trick-or-treaters and parents until the holiday itself is no longer practiced. This is going to be the most modern entry on this tier, and I'm sure many of you already know the story of Elisa Lam, but I hope you'll indulge me while I share it with those of us that don't. Before we begin with this one, I'd like you to watch a video of her. And don't worry, it's nothing graphic, but to truly understand how bizarre this case is, this is really something you need to see. If you thought that was weird, it's about to get a lot weirder. The footage you just watched, which was taken on January 31st, 2013, would be the last time Elisa would ever be seen alive. 8 days later, on the 8th, her parents reported her missing, and on the 19th of February, search and rescue crews would make the most shocking discovery of their lives. Somehow, Elisa ended up on the roof and managed to get into one of the water tanks. Now, it's heavily speculated, especially on the internet, but the facts are as follows. She was a very mentally ill young woman who could have very well been suffering an extreme manic episode due to bipolar. Taking away the hotel's seriously creepy past and the fact that if any one building in the country could have had a poltergeist, the Cecil Hotel would definitely be a contender on that list. I won't attempt to pass my opinions and deductive reasoning as fact, as I believe we simply aren't equipped to answer the questions this case asks us. What happened to Elisa Lam is a tragedy and one we won't soon forget. This is going to be a little bit of a shorter entry, I just wanted to share it with you. While doing research for this tier, I went down a metric ton of urban legends that claim to have ties to true crime cases, and this one honestly kind of shocked me. So I'm sure we've all heard the classic high beam scary story, or some different version of it. The one I grew up with goes a little something like this. A lady stops at a gas station to get some gas. She fills her tank up and then goes inside to pay. When she's coming back out, the gas station attendant calls her back in and tells her that there was a problem processing the payment and that she needs to come back inside right now. The lady was confused because the transaction showed completed and approved. She relayed that to him and was getting ready to leave, but the attendant once again urged her to come in to pay or she'd be in trouble. She proceeded to go inside and started to argue with the attendant about his threat. He told her, "Calm down and listen carefully." He said that while she was pumping gas, a guy slipped into the backseat of her car on the other side and the attendant had already called the police. She became frightened and looked out just in time to see the car door open and the guy slip out. Stories like these are common, like they're pretty archetypical, but we enjoy every new version of it we hear. So if you have one that you've heard, maybe that's local to your area, drop it down in the comments and let's talk about it. Well, surprise, surprise, it turns out that this story actually may be based in a little bit more fact than we're aware of. While doing research for this tier, I came across a story from 1964 in New York City when an escaped killer hid in the backseat of a car and ironically, it belonged to an off-duty police officer, and instead of, the whole him getting out at a gas station thing or anything like that, the cop kind of freaked out, turned around, and shot the guy. So even though the real occurrence did not feature a lone female, it didn't necessarily happen at night, and no third person was involved, the legend may have sprung out of this real incident, and it may not have. Nevertheless, I can definitely see where the inspiration for this one came from. Every town has that one creepy old landmark with some gruesome folklore attached to it. More often than not, for some reason, it turns out to be like a bridge or a tree, in my experience. At least, I don't know, my area has a tree. I don't know why, and I'm not going to speculate why, but I had to read about creepy old bridges for like 2 weeks, and it got really, really, really old. But I think I found the most tangible one. If your town has a similar story with a different twist on this concept, I'd love to talk about it. So this one's going to take place in Anderson, South Carolina. A local farm girl and unwed mother gave birth to a baby on September 30th, 1954. 2 days later, her mother died in a farming accident, leaving the girl and her newborn baby alone. 13 days after that, on the 13th of October, the young mother was sent a telegram stating that the child's father had been killed in a training accident at the nearby army base. And on October 30th, one day before Halloween, the young woman walked halfway across the bridge with her child, tossed the baby into the water, went back home, and she was found in the rafters of her house several days later. The following October, locals began reporting cries of a baby at night coming from the bridge in all directions. The sound would carry across the fields, into the woods, and surrounding countryside. Others have said that they saw a woman dressed entirely in white down in the water looking up at them, which might add is like the creepiest thing. Like, I'd probably faint and fall over the side. Like, I don't know. Like, mama didn't raise no coward, but if you can't punch it, you can't shoot it, and you can't call the cops on it, no mas. I'm not partaking in any of that foolishness. Alright, so as promised at the beginning, I'd like to tell you a story about my hometown. It's one I've seen told often, but for some reason they always leave out one really important detail. Some of you may have already heard about the Axeman of New Orleans. You know, the guy that told the newspapers, anybody not playing jazz at night's gonna get the axe. It was a truly iconic bit of spooky New Orleans history. But for some reason, every time it's brought up in TV or movies, the fact that the Axeman only targeted Italian shop owners is left out. And out of the 12 people he attacked with an axe, only 6 of them died. And let me clarify right off the get, like, I'm not saying, you know, oh, more people should have died, but I'm saying, bro, you're hitting people with an axe. Like, how do you not succeed, you know? So not only was the infamous Jazz It or Get the Axe guy probably just some really racist local shop owner, but he also only have like a 0.5 kill confirmed ratio with an axe, so I'm gonna need some L's in the chat for this guy. So just as a little bit of housekeeping, 2 of the entries from this tier have turned into different beasts of their own during development, and as such, one will be dropping down to the 6th tier, and the other is going to be getting covered in its own deep dive, for reasons that I will clarify when the time comes. If you would like to know which is going where, maybe you should stick around, because both are absolutely insane. Like, I just feel that neither would be appropriate for this video, for similar and different reasons. So as such, this video's a little shorter than it was supposed to be, but that's fine because tier 2 is going to be like 2 or 3 times as long. Make sure to tune in Halloween night to see the debut volume of another series of mine, Unalived, in which we'll be discussing the beyond suspicious circumstances of the deaths of Flo Barnett, Gary Webb, and Rebecca Zahau. Their stories have lived rent-free in my head for a few years now, and it won't take much for them to move into yours. And just so you're aware, if you don't like, comment, and subscribe, the next time you're watching your favorite TV show, Peter Dinklage is going to crawl out of your screen and yell at you for as long as it takes for you to miss the rest of it. Thanks for watching. Good night.